A village life in Santa Monica. Since moving to Los Angeles in 1991, I've had the good fortune to live in a 6-unit mid-century apartment building co-designed and co-developed by Frank Gehry before he became Frank Gehry in the Ocean Park neighborhood of Santa Monica. Our 6-unit community has long provided a place of security and mutual support, from huddling together on the balcony when the 1994 earthquake hit to watching each other's children when a parent needs to run an errand. As home ownership in global cities like LA becomes ever harder to achieve, hopefully Angelenos of the future will embrace this kind of lifestyle. But to do so demands a fundamental reorientation of values, both personally and at the level of the community. It demands giving up on the assumption of building equity in a house and dwelling within one's own 4 walls, and it rejects an untrammeled, speculative housing market. This is because our pleasant lifestyle is made possible by rent control. It's also made possible by a community commitment to good neighborhood public schools, as well as other essentials for multifamily residential life, like public space. Take away any of the legs of this new version of the American dream and it all falls apart. To achieve this essentially European lifestyle involves hard political choices, begging the question, how far is the next generation willing to go in terms of redefining home? The answer will shape the future of LA houses and housing.
I was probably about 10 years old, so this has been in the early 70s, and my family was coming. We were going to go to Disneyland, but we were going to go to a friend's house in the valley, and we basically came on the 405, and I just vividly remember coming south on the 405, and as the hillside opens up and you have this first shot of like the expanse of Los Angeles, I remember like being at the top of the hill and just seeing this like huge expanse, this very optimistic kind of uppity song, and it just kind of laid out LA for me. And so literally that was my first memory of Los Angeles. You know, obviously I was on my way to Disneyland. I was probably pretty jazzed about that, so things were pretty good in general. But I do remember that view.
There's like a really great quote I've heard about Los Angeles where there's 1,000 Los Angeleses, and the trick to the city is finding the one that works for you. And I really believe in that. I spent the first 3 years here without a car, which is like unheard of for a lot of people, but still getting to know the city well enough without that, and making sure that I had everything I needed where I could get to. So I managed somehow to make a big city feel pretty small in that sense, which I've enjoyed. But sometimes the scale can be a little daunting. If there's something cool going on the other side of town, it's not always easy to get there. And that can be a little tough sometimes. It feels like you're missing out.
To me, LA is broken up into 100 different small pieces. And every single one has their own character and structure and architecture and food and culture and life. And yeah, I live in Venice and I really enjoy it compared to the other hundreds of neighborhoods that make up LA. I think there's a freedom there that probably exists elsewhere, but there's a freedom in every sort. It's a little grungy because of that, and people look down on it because of that, but there kind of are, the rules are more like guidelines. You can cross the street whenever you feel like it. You can ride a bicycle to get somewhere, walk, take a car, go down the boardwalk, roller skate. All the houses are different. Every time there's a new house being built, there's some new material being used or new form happening. It seems like there are no codes, or people that decide to build in Venice are very inventive. Part of the freedom is the architecture. Part of the freedom is that there are people selling stuff on the boardwalk. There are people walking around barefoot. There are people showing up in Maseratis. There's like, it's the full scale, like the full range. Everything exists there. And a lot of times they clash too, which is exciting.
No, it's the same problems as back east. There's a lot of, conservative thought. It's not as liberal. There's definitely not as much leisure time as it seems like. There should be like just a lot of surfing and hanging out, and It's definitely not that thing. I also feel like I kind of missed the boat. Like when I first got here, prices were so cheap compared to now for houses and like anything. And now it's kind of impossible to buy into the California dream kind of promise thing. Like a little yard is impossible, really. You know, you look at Santa Monica through the housing crisis, and housing prices were stable. There was no downturn. The price to buy in stayed the same. So why is that? There's good schools. Schools are really good, and that maintained. So there are other factors that affect how you can buy into and participate in the lifestyle that kind of seem not part of the discussion usually. It's just, can I make enough money to buy in? Or if like there's a downturn, maybe I'll be able to do it. But there are places that are insulated from. Yeah. So, and now you're seeing like building types and housing that is just, one, it's terrible, but two, they're really small. Like the economic factors to make something really small and really cheap, and the type of construction you see being built everywhere, the like stick frame crap, doesn't seem all that alluring, like to wanna
Buy into.
right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It seems like, I don't know, feeling pretty pessimistic, but the weather will stay good.
For now. Los Angeles originated the post-war suburb, which in turn gave birth to local development politics. In 1971, Rayner Banham named the expansive flatlands of the LA basin the Plains of Id, where, quote, the crudest urban lusts and most fundamental aspirations are created, manipulated, and, with luck, satisfied. The domestic id residing in this suburban imaginary is reinforced by collective politics of neighborhood, and change to the existing order is a threat to aspirations. Not in my backyard, or NIMBY, captures at once the privacy of one's home with spatial control by the community. In a city with 500,000 backyards, it shouldn't be surprising to find that there are NIMBY reactions to urban growth. The elision between suburban and urban development ignites urban politics. With the new millennium came evidence that LA's era of sprawl was over. It was time to refashion into a bona fide metropolis. This is what local architects and urbanists have been advocating for decades, without predicting the side effects that now accompany this transformation. Recently, sites of every sort are targeted for building as densely as possible to meet almost unlimited demand. At the end of 2015, some 25,000 units were in development in downtown Los Angeles. But hyper-opportunistic development comes with other issues. Projects are built quickly, cheaply, and without public interest. Poor neighborhoods of color and industrial zones are threatened with gentrification, and overdevelopment plagues middle-class neighborhoods. Infill housing at any scale, in any neighborhood, is a threat to the existing order. It tends to push values upward, accelerate the neighborhood's turnover, and symbolize speculation. An exception is dedicated affordable infill housing, one strategy of anti-gentrification that comes with its own opposing forces. Architecture can thwart hyper-opportunistic development by upholding public interest. In order to do so, the city's planning culture requires overhaul and designers' participation. To embolden architecture and planning in LA will not be easy, but it sets aside an imperfect status quo in order to open possibilities for a better city in the future.
I remember also my uncle asking me one time, he said, doesn't it ever just feel kind of disconcerting that no matter which direction you drive, you're gonna see like an hour of like development? in any direction you drive, you're gonna drive an hour and you're gonna see, and like, don't you just kind of feel surrounded? And I said, yeah, sometimes if you think about it too much. Yeah. But then you also can, get out of town on the weekends, and I think that's what LA has to offer is, you have the mountains, you have the desert, you have a lot of adjacent kind of, all the national parks within California, all those things that, you know, so you can get out of LA when you need to get out of LA.
It's just sprawl, but it's like a dense sprawl. I mean, it's not. When I imagine sprawl, it's like a bunch of land and just one-story buildings kind of scattered. But LA is a pretty dense sprawl. It's 3 to 4, maybe 5 stories, kind of continuously, and so.
You know what? I think the biggest hurdle here now is overcoming that friction. You know, in terms of how do we accommodate more people in a positive way? Because we know, hey, we all read the papers and we hear it on the radio. The housing shortage is acute.
That's
Housing's
scary.
very expensive. It's almost they can't do enough to solve the problem. I mean, the state's doing stuff, and yet we've got a whole bunch of people who are resistant to that. It's almost like we don't want any more outsiders coming in, but we need the outsiders coming in because it's been very positive for the economy. It's been very positive creatively and culturally, and so how do we overcome that? And it's really quite difficult. And yet at the same time, I think there are the suburbs and single-family homes in some areas are just gorgeous, and we should keep those and not mess around with those, and make more interesting, denser developments in the appropriate locations, so we can have both.
15 years ago, I woke up in a big house in a strange city against the recommendations of nearly all my friends, family members, colleagues, coworkers, and casual acquaintances, one of whom told me something to the effect of, if you move there, you'll have to spend all your time in your car, but don't worry, there's nothing to see. But I never found the hell A that everyone warned me about. To me, it was magical that I might buy my groceries at a farmer's market in the middle of January, drink at the bars I'd watched in the movie Swingers, often next to the people who starred in Swingers, and climb an actual mountain in my neighborhood where I could take in the entire city at once. In those first few months, I went up there a lot, trying to piece together this vast metropolis by tracing the streets I'd seen on my Thomas guide, standing behind the most famous sign on earth, which captioned the view of my new home with a very appropriate O. I think I might actually have been right there, pondering the endless grid, when I realized I could probably walk to the farmer's market instead of circling in a parking garage. Then I noticed those bars were really only a short stroll away too, and this was the best part, I could easily stumble into new ones I discovered along the way. I learned that the world's most comprehensive transportation system was being reknit below my feet, and when I wasn't speeding past them in a vehicle, I saw that those were bike lanes painted on the fringes of nearby roads. I found secret staircases carved into those mountains and met other people on them who were just like me, discovering their own new Los Angeleses. The biggest change that LA has seen in the last 1.5 decades has not been sparked by giant development, but because Angelenos are using their city in a different way. There are parklets that shift parking spaces into shady seating, ciclovia, which turns wide streets into playgrounds for pedestrians. The other day I was riding the city's new bike share through downtown and found myself disoriented. The street had become nearly unrecognizable. Nothing had changed except for a few swipes of paint. It was because there were suddenly so many more people enjoying it. The city still manages to surprise and delight me every single day, just like it did in my first wide-eyed moments. And after watching it transform around me, there's one thing I can say with confidence. The LA we live in is not static, and simply by choosing the way we move through it, we can be part of that change. And in a way, I should thank that guy who warned me about moving here, because he was right. It was really only by getting out of the car that I found the things worth seeing.
It's just the lifestyle is different. I didn't think I would like it so much. I didn't think that it would suit me as well as it does. But I mean, Los Angeles is just, I mean, it's this beautifully diverse place, and you can really get anything that you want out of the city. And I've been here for 7 years now, and every neighborhood I move to, I feel like I get a different experience, and I do new things and discover a new LA. And there's a new LA in every single neighborhood. So, you know, while I was in school, I was in downtown. And even in the years that I was in school and in downtown, downtown changed. And you sort of like get a new feel and a new vibe from that part of the city. And then you sort of, I've been moving slowly west from downtown, but it's like every new neighborhood, there's new restaurants, there's new people, there's new ways of transit. You know, there's certain neighborhoods that you can walk in, certain areas that you bike, drive. So it's like you experience the city, you know, at all these different speeds. Now I live in West Hollywood, which is very walkable. I almost never use my car. I bike to work, and things seem a little bit slower and a little bit calmer, not having to sit in traffic.
So the idea of living in New York is that everyone creates its own pocket. Everyone creates their own pocket to live in. And I assume that that would be the case in LA as well. But what was surprising to me was coming to the city is exactly how fractured the different areas of the city are, and how much people are able to get away with not exploring the city in its entirety. I think that a lot of the moves that are occurring now in terms of transit and in terms of design are trying to find some sort of uniformity and trying to find some sort of connection between all the disparate parts of the city, which I think is a double-edged sword. I think connection is great, but part of the charm and the beauty of the city is actually having these disparate neighborhoods and these disparate pockets of character that I think are getting lost in a lot of major urban places now.
Their idea of LA was very much based in what did it look like in 1988, which was very like pre-riots. And so a lot of the stereotypes of LA that were really prevalent around 1988, 1990, those years, are still very present in their head, and they don't really understand that things have changed a lot since then. So when I moved here, let's see, in 2005, they still thought that USC was in like a very dangerous neighborhood, that you couldn't go past Vermont and past the 10 without like locking your doors. In their mind, I think at that time it was a lot about crime, a lot about safety. They didn't know that downtown LA was even a place you could go. And when I moved there, they were like, I don't understand what kind of, who lives there? Like, what is downtown LA? Like, it's just this, it was a totally foreign concept to them. I think it's changed so much. Like, I can take the train to work. So many of my friends ride bicycles. I live in South LA, in a place that my parents would have never even dreamed that it would be safe, and it's perfectly safe.
One of the best things that's happened is traffic congestion.
So there's more of it or less of it?
More of it. And it's because, so in the early 80s, if I wanted to go eat something interesting, we went actually to Melrose and Temple, roughly. For dinner after work, no problem, you could get across, take you half an hour. You couldn't do that in half an hour now. So what's happened is, it's forced a duplication of amenity and things, so that I have my world of things that I can do here, which isn't all that different from what you can do in Silver Lake, although it's hillier or whatever. But that means that the village qualities of LA have started to strengthen. And there are more people on the street, and a lot of the empty street storefront, little storefront has come back. That was empty for years, because the deal was you would go to a big shopping center if you were going to shop, but none of that local commercial was working. But so the issue is, I think that neighborhood has has regrown in LA.
The idea of neighborhood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and each neighborhood has its own city center.
Oh yeah, and it's mostly, and it fights for its value in the hierarchy of where the best neighborhood is.
Yeah.
And I think that's all really healthy and wonderful.